Hello, and welcome to Fear Noir. Before we begin, take a moment to leave a comment and let me know where you're listening from. I always love reading them. If you enjoy slow, unsettling stories that gently pull you into the darkness, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now, get comfortable, let your body become still, and allow the noise of the outside world to fade into silence. Tonight, the darkness has a story waiting just for you, so close your eyes, listen closely, and let yourself drift into Fear Noir. Story 1. My father died very suddenly on a Tuesday afternoon. I was out of town on a business trip when my mother called me. The doctors said it was a massive heart failure. He had been sitting up in a hospital bed recovering from what was supposed to be a minor procedure, and then, without warning, he was gone. By the time I managed to get on the first flight home, they had already moved his body. I never got the chance to see him one last time. I never got to say goodbye, never got to hear his voice again, never got the chance to tell him anything that mattered. That fact stayed with me more than anything else. The funeral passed in a blur. I remember black clothes, weak coffee in paper cups, quiet conversations with relatives I had not seen in years, and the heavy feeling that I was walking through someone else's life. My mother looked completely broken. She was not the kind of person who cried loudly or made a scene. She seemed worse than that. She looked hollow, like whatever had made her herself had gone missing the same day my father died. People would speak to her and she would nod or murmur something polite, but her eyes never seemed to land on anyone. Most of the time she stared down the hallway of the house or at some distant spot on the wall, as if she was waiting for something that was never going to come back. I stayed with her for a few days after the funeral to help with all the paperwork and the practical things that have to be done, even when someone's whole world has just ended. Insurance forms, calls from the hospital, funeral bills, little tasks that feel insulting in the middle of grief. But she barely spoke to me. She moved slowly around the house, sat in her chair, and seemed to shrink more every day. Eventually, I had to go back to my own apartment across the city. I had work, I had responsibilities. Life, unfairly, was still moving forward. About a week after the funeral, my mother called and asked me to come over. When I got to the house, everything was dark. The curtains were closed, even though it was daytime. The place felt stale, like no one had opened a window or turned on a light since the day of the funeral. She was standing in the living room beside 3 large cardboard moving boxes. They were sealed tightly with thick layers of packing tape, wrapped around and around as if she had been terrified of them opening. The first thing I noticed was how bad she looked. Her eyes were sunken and red, and her hands were shaking so badly that even standing still seemed difficult for her. She pointed at the boxes. "Take these," she said. Her voice sounded thin and strained, like it had been scraped raw. I looked down at them. "What are they?" "They are his clothes," she said. "His coats, his suits, his boots. Everything he wore all the time." I bent down and grabbed one of the boxes, expecting normal weight, and nearly dropped it. It was far heavier than I thought it would be. "I can take them to the donation center this weekend," I told her. "Somebody could really use them." The second I said that, she grabbed my arm. Her hand clamped down so hard that her nails dug through my shirt and into my skin. I looked up at her, shocked. There was real panic in her face. "No," she said sharply. "Do not donate them. Do not give them to anybody. And do not wear them yourself. You need to burn them." For a second, I honestly thought I had misheard her. "Burn them," I said. "Why would I burn them? Dad had good clothes. Someone could use them." Tears filled her eyes almost immediately. She started shaking her head over and over, breathing too fast. "Just burn them," she said. "Please. Take them somewhere far away, pour gasoline on them, and burn every single piece. I cannot do it. You have to do it." She looked completely desperate, and at the time I thought it was grief talking. I thought losing her husband of 40 years had broken something in her for a while. I imagined that maybe the thought of seeing strangers wear his clothes felt unbearable to her. Maybe getting rid of them any other way felt disrespectful. Grief makes people say and do strange things, and I did not want to argue with her when she was that upset. So I lied. "Okay," I told her softly. "I'll take care of it today. You don't have to think about them again." She let go of my arm and sat back down like all the strength had gone out of her. I carried the 3 boxes to my car, loaded them into the trunk, and drove back to my apartment. When I got home, I carried the boxes inside and set them in the living room. Then I sat down on the couch and stared at them for a while. I felt guilty for lying to my mother, but I could not bring myself to burn my father's things. It felt wasteful, yes, but more than that, it felt wrong. My father had been a hard-working man. He cared about his clothes, his heavy wool coat, his pressed suits, his thick work boots. All of it felt connected to him in a way I could not explain. They were ordinary objects, but they had carried his shape and his scent and the habits of his life. Burning them felt too much like destroying what little of him I still had left. In the end, I decided to keep them. I took a pair of scissors, cut through the tape, and opened the first box. The smell hit me right away. It was my father's smell. Old wool, cold air, a faint metallic note from the machine shop where he had worked for years, and something else that was just him, something I had known my whole life without ever needing to name it. The scent hit me so hard that for a moment I just stood there with my hand on the edge of the box, trying not to cry. I bought some sturdy wooden hangers and carefully hung everything in my closet. His winter coats went on one side. His gray and navy suits hung beside them. I folded the flannel shirts and put them in a drawer. His steel-toe leather work boots I lined up neatly on the closet floor beneath the hanging clothes. When I was done, it felt almost like I had made a small shrine without meaning to. For the first few weeks, having those things in my apartment brought me real comfort. Every morning when I opened my closet to get dressed for work, I would see his trench coat hanging there and feel a brief, warm ache in my chest. It felt like I was protecting something, preserving him in the only way I still could. I thought I had made the right choice. Then I started noticing the way the clothes hung. At first it was subtle, just something that caught my eye and made me pause. When clothes hang on a hanger, they are supposed to fall flat. The shoulders keep a little shape because of the hanger, sure, but the rest of the fabric should drop straight down. The body should look empty. My father's clothes did not hang that way. They kept a full, rounded, three-dimensional shape. The chest of the trench coat pushed outward as if something inside it was filling the space. The sleeves did not hang limp. They curved slightly away from the body of the coat, leaving empty space between the arms and torso, like elbows bent in a resting position. His suit pants did not lie flat either. The legs stayed open and round, as if they still remembered the exact shape of the man who had worn them. It looked wrong. The only way I can explain it is this: the clothes did not look hung up. They looked occupied, as if an invisible person was standing inside them, staying still and holding very, very carefully in place. I try to explain it away. My father had been a large man, broad through the shoulders and chest. The fabric was heavy, especially the wool coats. Maybe years of wear had molded the clothes to his body, and the stiffness of the material was making them keep that shape. Every time I noticed it, I pressed the fabric flat with my hands. I smoothed the coat fronts, folded the sleeves inward, pressed the pant legs together. But the next morning, without fail, the shape would be back again, bulging slightly at the chest, curved at the arms, open at the legs. Then came the sound. It started late at night, usually sometime between 2 and 3 in the morning. I am a light sleeper, and my apartment is usually very quiet at night, so even small sounds stand out. I was lying in bed one night, half awake, staring at the ceiling when I heard it for the first time. It was faint, but once I noticed it, I could not ignore it. A wet, rhythmic wheezing sound coming from the direction of the closet. It sounded almost like breathing, but not normal breathing. It was slow and labored, as if air was being pulled in through something clogged and then pushed back out again with effort. Inhale, a pause, then a long, dragging exhale. It reminded me of old metal bellows or someone breathing through a chest full of fluid. My apartment building is old, built sometime in the early 1940s. The heating system runs through ancient radiator pipes inside the walls. The main pipe for my unit goes right behind the wall of my bedroom closet. In winter, those pipes make all kinds of noises. Clanks, groans, hissing sounds. I told myself that was all it was. Steam pushing through a narrow section of pipe. Air catching in a bad valve. I gave myself every practical explanation I could think of, and because I wanted to believe them, I accepted them. For a while, anyway. Then one Tuesday morning, everything changed. I woke up at my usual time, showered, and walked toward the kitchen to make coffee. The kitchen is at the end of a narrow hallway in my apartment, and the floor there is covered in cheap white linoleum. I turned the corner and stopped so suddenly that I almost slipped. My father's work boots were in the middle of the kitchen floor. They were not tossed there randomly. They were placed carefully side by side, angled slightly outward. It was the exact way my father used to stand at the sink when he washed dishes. That detail hit me immediately, and the recognition was somehow worse than the sight itself. I just stood there staring. I live alone. I do not have a roommate. No partner has a key. I do not have pets. There was no one else in the apartment who could have moved them. I turned around and checked the front door first. The deadbolt was locked. The chain was still in place. Then I checked every window, including the fire escape window in the bedroom. All locked. Nothing disturbed. When I came back to the kitchen, the boots were still there, exactly where I had found them. I tried to reason it out. Stress can do strange things. Sleep can do stranger things. I thought maybe I had sleepwalked. Maybe I had gotten out of bed during the night, opened the closet, carried the boots into the kitchen, set them down, and then gone back to bed without remembering it. It sounded ridiculous, but it was still more acceptable than the alternative. I bent down and picked them up. They felt unusually heavy, almost as if they were still being worn. Then my fingers brushed the inside of one boot, just along the leather collar, and I felt warmth. Not room temperature, not leather holding onto yesterday's heat. It felt warm the way shoes feel when someone has just taken them off. A cold shiver ran through me. Still, I carried them back to the closet, shoved them deep into the back corner behind some storage bins, and told myself that I was overtired and starting to scare myself. The next day, I went to work like normal. I left around 8 in the morning and got back home just after 6. I unlocked the front door, stepped inside, dropped my keys into the ceramic bowl on the small table by the entrance, and walked into the living room. Then I stopped. My father's trench coat was draped over one of the dining chairs. The chair had been pulled out from the table. The coat sat over the backrest in a way that made it look like someone had just shrugged it off their shoulders while sitting down. The sleeves were stretched forward across the tabletop, resting there like arms laid out after a long day. Under the chair, positioned neatly, were the boots. It looked exactly like someone was seated there, leaning toward the table and waiting patiently for supper. That was the moment the sleepwalking explanation died completely. I had been gone all day. I had not even been in the apartment. The fear that hit me then was mixed with anger. I was suddenly convinced that someone was getting into my apartment while I was gone. Maybe the building superintendent had a master key. Maybe an old tenant still had a copy. Maybe someone was playing some sick joke. But if that was true, it was worse than theft. Someone was entering my home, touching my dead father's clothes and arranging them like a performance. I searched the whole apartment, drawers, cabinets, electronics, closet, the small safe where I keep some cash and documents. Nothing was missing. Nothing else had been moved. Whoever had done it had taken nothing. They had just arranged the clothes and left. That frightened me more than a robbery would have. I decided I needed proof before I called the police or accused management of something insane. So I dug an old smartphone out of my desk. The camera still worked. I cleared the storage, downloaded a motion-activated security app, and decided I would film the hallway that night. I moved the trench coat and the boots back into the closet, shut the door, and set the old phone up in the kitchen, leaning it against the coffee maker. I angled it carefully so it had a wide view of the hallway. From there, it could see the front door and my bedroom door. Anyone coming in or out would pass directly through the frame. I plugged the phone into the wall so the battery would not die, turned on the app, switched off all the lights, and went to bed. This time I locked my bedroom door from the inside. That night, the wheezing behind the closet door was louder than ever. It sounded wet, deep, exhausted, like something ancient and sick dragging air into itself by force. I put in earplugs, pulled the blanket over my head, and eventually fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up just before sunrise. The first thing I checked was the bedroom door, still shut, still locked from the inside. For a second, relief washed over me. I unlocked the door, walked down the hall, and found the old phone right where I had left it. I opened the app. It had captured one long video file from the night. a little over 3.5 hours long. I made myself some instant coffee, sat at the dining table, and hit play. At first, there was nothing, just the dark hallway, dimly lit by the yellow streetlight coming through the living room window. The timestamp in the corner crawled forward minute by minute. 1 hour, 2 hours, nothing moved. Then, at exactly 2:14 a.m., the bedroom door opened. I felt every muscle in my body lock up. The handle turned slowly. The door I had locked from the inside swung open into the hallway. I kept staring at the screen, expecting to see a person step out. A burglar, the super, some living explanation. Instead, my father's clothes came out. The trench coat, the gray suit pants, the heavy boots. But there was something inside them. Not a body, not anything I could name. Just a shape that filled them wrong. The clothes were far too large for whatever wore them. The figure was impossibly tall and unnaturally thin. The coat hung from it like a blanket thrown over sticks. The suit pants bagged around legs as narrow as poles. And the way it moved was not human at all. It took one slow step with the right boot. Then it paused, completely still, for 2 seconds. Then the shoulders twitched sharply. Then the left boot dragged forward. Step, pause, twitch, drag, over and over. It came down the hallway toward the kitchen camera, and then it did something that completely shattered whatever was left of my mind. It stopped by the wall. Slowly, it lifted one boot and pressed the sole flat against the vertical wall. Then it lifted the other and placed it higher. Then it kept walking, up the wall, straight upward, like gravity had decided to ignore it. The boots made soft, thudding sounds against the drywall as it climbed. It reached the ceiling and moved onto it as easily as if it were crossing a floor. Then the neck area of the coat twisted with a horrible snapping motion. The empty collar rotated around until it faced forward. Because it was upside down, the coat sleeves and pant legs fell open toward the camera. There were no arms inside, no legs, no skin, no bones. The inside of the clothes was packed solid with writhing, pale tendrils, thousands of them. They were long and slick and hair thin in some places, thicker in others, constantly twisting over one another. They looked like blind white worms massed together so tightly they formed the rough shape of limbs. They spilled out of the cuffs in clusters, gripping the ceiling and dragging the coat forward. The phone microphone even picked up the sound they made, a faint, wet sliding noise like raw noodles or soaked cords rubbing together. The thing crawled across my ceiling into the kitchen. Then it dropped. It hit the floor with a heavy, solid crash that should have woken me instantly. For a moment it stood there, towering over the counters. Then it turned toward the stove. I watched it raise one sleeve as the tendrils inside pushed forward, shaping the cloth into a crooked imitation of an arm. It made slow circular motions over the cold, unlit burner. Then it reached toward the cabinets and mimed opening one, as if taking out a pan. That was when I understood what it was doing. It was copying my father. It was acting out the exact routine he used to do every morning when he made breakfast. I stopped the video. I could not watch anymore. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my mug. It smashed on the floor and hot water splashed over my feet, but I barely noticed. I grabbed my real phone and called my mother. She answered almost immediately. I did not even say hello. "You need to tell me what you gave me," I shouted. I put a camera in my apartment. The clothes are moving around on their own. There's something inside them. It's not human. It crawls on the ceiling. It's full of worms. It's in my apartment right now." The line went silent. For 5 long seconds, she said nothing. Then she exploded. "I told you to burn them!" She screamed so loudly the speaker distorted. "I told you exactly what to do. Why didn't you listen? You stupid boy, you brought it into your home." "What is it?" I yelled back. "Why didn't you tell me the truth? What the hell did you give me?" "Get out!" she screamed. I could hear her crying so hard she could barely breathe. "Do not ask questions. Drop the phone, walk out the front door, and get out of that apartment right now. I'm getting my keys. I'm coming there. Just leave." "I am not leaving until you tell me what this is," I shouted. I was pacing by then, stepping around the broken mug's pieces on the floor, my voice shaking just as much as my hands. She took a long, ragged breath and forced herself to speak. "You were not there when he died," she said in a fast, trembling whisper. "The doctors told me his heart was failing. I was sitting beside him, holding his hand. Everything was quiet. The monitors were slow. Then he sat up." I stopped moving. "He sat straight up in the bed," she said. He let go of my hand and pointed into the corner of the room, high up near the ceiling. His eyes were wide open, wider than I'd ever seen them. He looked at me and said he could see something. He said there was something in the corner that he was not supposed to see, something living people are not meant to notice. He tried to look away, but he couldn't. He said it was looking back at him. A cold numbness spread through me. Then he started screaming, she said, sobbing. He begged me to save him. He grabbed my arm so hard he bruised me. He never looked away from that corner, and then the monitor flatlined. He died, staring at it. She told me the doctors rushed in and said it was terminal agitation, some last misfiring of the brain before death. Hallucinations, fear, meaningless final activity. "But it wasn't a hallucination," I said. "No," she whispered. A few days later, I started hearing his boots in the hallway at night. I'd wake up and find his coats hanging on different hooks in the mudroom. I felt something behind me in the kitchen when I washed dishes. Something cold, something wrong. Whatever he saw in that hospital room followed him home. It attached itself to the things he wore the most, the things that carried his shape, his smell. It was trying to become him. Then she admitted the part that hurt me almost as much as the fear. She said she had been too terrified to burn the clothes herself. Every time she got near the closet, she heard the wheezing. So when it seemed quiet during the day, she stuffed everything into boxes, taped them shut, and gave them to me, hoping I would do what she could not. She was crying so hard by then that some of her words were breaking apart. She kept apologizing, kept telling me to run. "I'm leaving now," I said finally. "Meet me outside." I ended the call and ran for the front door. I grabbed the handle. It would not turn. I reached for the deadbolt and twisted as hard as I could. Nothing. It was locked solid, as if welded in place. I planted one foot against the wall for leverage and used both hands. It did not move, even slightly. Then I reached for my keys. The ceramic bowl on the table was empty. My keys were gone. The panic that hit me then was so strong, nearly made me vomit. I tore through the kitchen counters, the table, everywhere I might have absent-mindedly set them. Nothing. Then I saw the old smartphone still sitting near the coffee maker. I had only watched part of the file. I had stopped after seeing the thing in the kitchen. The video was much longer than that. With shaking hands, I picked up the phone and hit play. The footage resumed. The thing finished acting out the breakfast routine. Then it turned and moved back down the hall with that jerking, broken walk. It entered my bedroom. From the camera angle, I could see the edge of my bed. I could see myself sleeping under the blankets. The thing walked right up to my bedside. Then it stopped. It stood there for hours. I watched the timestamp race from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock. The whole time it stayed motionless, looming over me while I slept. The only movement came from the tendrils pushing out of the open collar of the coat, slowly twisting in the dark. At 5:50 a.m., just before my alarm normally rings, it moved again. It left the bedroom, walked past the camera, and went straight to the front door. One sleeve reached into the ceramic bowl, took my keys, and locked the door from the inside. Then it went to the living room window, slid it open, stretched one sleeve outside, and dropped my keys into the street 3 floors below. After that, it closed the window, walked back into my bedroom, stepped into the closet, and shut the door behind itself. The video ended. I dropped the phone. It hit the floor and the screen cracked. I stood there in the kitchen realizing 2 things at once. I was trapped inside my apartment, and whatever was inside those clothes was back in the closet. For a few seconds, everything went silent, truly silent. Then I heard it. The wooden closet door in my bedroom slowly creaked open. One heavy boot stepped onto the floor, then the other. After that came the dragging sound, slow and deliberate, followed by a wet, shifting noise like soft flesh rubbing against itself. I knew exactly what it was. Those tendrils moving inside the coat and trousers. The footsteps crossed my bedroom, then entered the hallway. I did not think. I ran. I sprinted out of the kitchen, threw myself into the bathroom, slammed the door, and shoved the metal bolt across the frame. Then I backed up until I hit the bathtub and fell into it, curling my knees to my chest like a child. I called emergency services and told them there was an intruder in my apartment, that I was trapped in the bathroom and that they needed to get here immediately. I texted my mother and told her not to come inside, to wait outside for the police. And now I am sitting in this dark bathtub, writing all of this on my phone while I still can. The police are supposedly on their way. My mother is supposedly on her way, but the footsteps have already reached the bathroom door. I can see the shadows of those heavy boots beneath the gap. I can hear the wet, squirming sound on the other side of the wood, like a bag full of live things pressing against the panels. The doorknob is turning slowly back and forth, not wildly, not desperately, patiently, testing the lock. I do not know how long this cheap, hollow bathroom door can hold. I do not know if police bullets will do anything to a thing made of writhing tendrils, wearing my dead father's clothes. I do not know if I am going to make it out of this apartment alive. But if I do not, then at least this will exist somewhere. At least someone will know that my mother was right, that I should have burned every piece the moment she handed them to me, and that whatever my father saw in that hospital room did not die with him. It followed him home, and now it is outside the bathroom door, wearing his coat, his boots, and his shape. waiting for me to come out. Story 2. A thick fog covered the old graveyard, spreading low across the ground like something alive. The tombstones were old and worn down, covered in moss and nearly hidden by tall grass and weeds. The air carried that strange mix of spring freshness and cold that made your skin feel tight. Above us, the trees were just beginning to grow new leaves, their branches hanging over a broken fence that looked like it could fall apart at any moment. Everything about the place felt forgotten. I could tell Quincy was scared. He was holding the rosary I had given him so tightly that his knuckles had turned pale. His breath came out in quick bursts, forming small clouds in the cold air. That rosary had belonged to my grandmother. She had dozens of them, hidden in drawers, boxes, and random corners of the house, like they were more than just objects to her. "I don't know about this, man," Quincy whispered. His voice tried to sound calm, but the fear was obvious. He pushed his glasses up his nose and looked around carefully, like something might jump out at any second. "Relax," I said, leaning casually on the shovel I had brought. Back then, we were just teenagers. I always acted like I had everything under control. It's funny how that changes when you grow older and realize how little control you ever really had. Under the light of the full moon, something began to form in the distance. At first, it looked like nothing more than a strange movement in the fog, something you could easily ignore if you wanted to. But slowly, it became clearer. A figure, a woman. Her shape grew more defined with each passing second. Long hair, a flowing dress from another time, and eyes that didn't belong to something dead. She was transparent, her form blending with the trees behind her, like she was part of the night itself. She wore a wide hat that shadowed her face slightly, but not enough to hide her expression. "Holy!" Quincy's voice broke as he stared. His knees shook. "You weren't lying. She's real." The first time I saw her, I was 13 years old. I lived with my grandparents just outside a small town, surrounded by forests and silence. My parents had died in a car accident when I was young. I didn't learn until much later that my mother had been drunk while driving. After that, my life didn't have much structure. My grandparents did their best, but they were old, and I had too much freedom. I used to sneak out at night, meeting up with friends who didn't really care about anything. One night, I took a shortcut through the woods on my way home, and that's when I found the graveyard. At first, I stayed far away, watching her from between the trees. She would walk slowly among the graves, sometimes covering her face with her hands as if she was crying, but no tears ever fell. I came back again and again, each time getting a little closer. The first time she noticed me, I ran. I don't even remember deciding to run, I just did. But something made me stop and look back. She was staring at me, her face filled with sadness. Not anger, not fear, just loneliness. I slowly walked toward her, even though every instinct told me not to. When I got close, her eyes locked onto mine. I had never seen anything like it. She was dead, and yet her eyes felt more alive than anyone I had ever met. "Of course she's real," I said to Quincy, snapping back to the present. I reached down and picked up the bag behind me. Bones inside shifted with a quiet, rattling sound as I lifted it onto my shoulder. "Just remember the plan. Don't mess this up." I walked toward her. She moved toward me too, floating more than walking. A soft smile appeared on her face as she reached out and touched mine. Her hand passed partly through me, sending a freezing sensation deep into my body. Still, I smiled back. "What kind of relationship do you even have with her?" Quincy asked, his voice shaking. I didn't answer right away. Over time, I had built something with her. I had spent countless nights in that graveyard, talking to her even though she never spoke back. Slowly, her sadness changed. She began to smile more. It felt like she understood me, like she listened. I cared about her, not in a strange or romantic way, but like someone you feel responsible for, like family. After a moment, she looked at Quincy, her expression shifting slightly, uncertain. "It's okay," I said. "He's here to help." Quincy looked at me like I had lost my mind, but he didn't say anything else. She turned and drifted deeper into the graveyard. We followed her. It had taken me years to learn who she was. I spent hours in the library digging through old records and newspapers. While other kids were out living their lives, I was chasing answers. Eventually, I found her name. Abigail Witherspot, the daughter of a governor. Her life was mostly a mystery, but I found enough. Her child had been murdered. Not long after, she died too, supposedly from falling out of a window. But something about it never felt right. After getting involved in things I shouldn't have, learning about rituals and the occult, I discovered what needed to be done. She couldn't rest because she had been separated from her child. That separation was not natural, it was intentional. That's why I brought Quincy. He was the only person I trusted. We had met in the library. He had noticed me going through old records constantly, and eventually we started talking. He didn't believe me at first, but now he had no choice. We reached her grave. The stone was so worn down that her name was no longer visible, just a blank slab covered in moss. "When I start digging," I said, turning to Quincy, "you start praying. Don't stop, no matter what." He nodded. "Yeah, I got it. Promise." "I promise." I started digging. The sound of the shovel cutting into the dirt echoed softly in the quiet night. Quincy began praying, his voice shaky at first, then slowly becoming more steady. It took longer than I expected. The pile of dirt grew larger and larger beside the grave. My arms burned and sweat covered my body despite the cold. Eventually, I hit something. Bones. Carefully, I uncovered them. Piece by piece, I tried to treat them with respect, placing them together as best as I could. As I moved her remains, something fell away from her wrists. A piece of rope, rotten and fragile. My stomach tightened. Then something else fell from her jaw. A gag. The truth hit me all at once. She hadn't fallen. She had been buried alive. I looked up at her. She didn't speak, but I knew I was right. Then I heard Quincy stumble in his prayer. "I told you not to stop," I shouted. He had seen something in the woods, a shape, a smile too wide, too dark, teeth shining in the moonlight. He tried to continue praying, but his voice failed him. Fear took over, and that's when everything went wrong. The ground beneath me moved. A root shot up from the dirt and wrapped around my ankle. Another followed, climbing up my leg, its thorns cutting into my skin. I cried out as it tightened and began pulling me down. Quincy screamed somewhere behind me. More roots burst from the ground, wrapping around my body, dragging me into the grave I had just opened. Above me, something hovered. The evil one. It didn't look fully human. It didn't look like anything that should exist. Its body twisted with the darkness around it. like it wasn't fully there. Its mouth stretched wide, deeper than any shadow, and it laughed. That laugh didn't sound natural. It echoed, like it was coming from somewhere far away and right next to me at the same time. I reached blindly, grabbing the bag. Bones spilled everywhere as I was pulled deeper into the soil. My hand found the small glass vial. Holy water. I tried to open it, but more roots wrapped around my arms, forcing them down. One wrapped around my neck, tightening. I couldn't breathe. Everything faded. The last thing I saw was Abigail covering her face, and that thing standing behind her like it owned her. Then everything went black. When I opened my eyes, I was somewhere else. It was bright, too bright. The space around me moved in ways I couldn't understand. Then I saw her, a woman dressed in blue. Her face was warm, glowing with something I can't explain. I recognized her from the pictures in my grandmother's house. She hugged me, and in that moment, everything felt peaceful. Then I was back in my body. Pain exploded through me as I struggled against the roots. Somehow I broke the vial in my hand. The glass cut into my skin, but I didn't care. I threw the holy water forward. It landed on the bones. With everything I had left, I shouted, "Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee." Silence. The laughter stopped. The roots stopped moving. The night went still. I tore the roots from my neck and pulled myself out of the grave, gasping for air. "Ron, help!" Quincy shouted. I crawled toward him. He was almost completely buried, only one arm free. Somehow I laughed. "This isn't funny," he yelled. I pulled him out. Then I heard a voice. "Thank you." I turned. Abigail stood there, no longer transparent. She looked alive. And beside her was a small boy, holding her hand. They smiled. Then slowly, they faded away. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't. I just stood there, watching them disappear. "I'm never hanging out with you again," Quincy said, trying to catch his breath. "That's fair," I replied, pulling glass from my hand. I smiled through the pain. I had freed them. That night changed everything. I became a ghost hunter, an exorcist. I deal with things people don't understand. But I never forgot Abigail or what I saw that night. Quincy never recovered. What we experienced stayed with him. He started drinking. Eventually, he died in a car accident just like my parents. Sometimes I wonder if that was just coincidence, or if something out there is still watching me. But one thing I know for sure, once you see true evil, you don't get to look away. Story 3. It took me a long time to finally convince myself to clean out the basement, but this weekend I had run out of excuses. I had bought the little house not too long ago. It was the biggest investment I had ever made in my life. For the first time, I finally had a place I could truly call my own. A place that could actually feel like home. The house wasn't in the best condition, but I had worked in construction for years, so most of the repairs were things I could handle myself. The only real problem was the basement. It was still packed with all the junk left behind by the previous owner. The place was stacked almost to the ceiling with cardboard boxes, broken furniture, random trash, and old family photographs. There was even a broken pool table shoved into one corner, half buried under piles of dusty boxes. What I didn't expect to find was the small wooden table with a monitor on it. I was moving one shaky pile of boxes out of the way, the kind that looked like it could collapse at any second, and somehow managed not to get crushed under it. That was when I noticed a small, empty space hidden between the stacks. In the middle of that space sat a little old brown table. It was dusty, damp, and looked like it had been sitting there untouched for years. Resting on top of it was an old monitor lying on its side. I squeezed my way through the narrow gap, unable to ignore my curiosity. When I set the monitor upright, I realized it was plugged in. A bundle of cables ran behind the table and disappeared into the wall. The table itself was pushed right up against the basement wall, and as I followed the cables with my eyes, I finally saw where they led. A security camera was mounted high up near the ceiling. It was covered in thick spider webs and layers of yellow-gray dust. The thing looked ancient, like it should have stopped working decades ago. But the tiny red light on it was still glowing. It was still on. At that point, my basement cleaning was basically over. My curiosity completely took over. What had this thing been watching down here all this time? Were there recordings, stored footage? Had it been running this entire time? I had to know. I pushed more boxes out of the way so I could get closer to the table. After digging around, I found an old folding camping chair buried under some junk and dragged it over. I sat down in front of the monitor and wiped years of dust off the screen with my sleeve. The screen buzzed and flickered to life. A faded yellowish image slowly appeared. To my disappointment, it wasn't some hidden horror or dark secret. It was just a security system login screen. Username. Password. Ah, damn it, I muttered under my breath. What could the password even be? Naturally, I still wasn't cleaning the basement. Instead, I started digging through the junk again, hoping I might find something useful. A note, a scrap of paper, anything that might tell me the password to this old system. For hours, I searched through everything. I found old photographs of people I didn't recognize, almost 100-year-old documents that were already falling apart, marriage papers, an old property deed, handwritten recipes, and stacks of useless trash. Nothing. Not a single clue. Frustrated, I dropped back into the folding chair and stared at the old login screen. Ah, shit, I whispered. Then a thought came to me. I typed in the most obvious thing I could think of, the kind of password old systems always seem to use. Username, admin, password, 12345. The screen flickered. Then the words appeared. Password accepted. A smile spread across my face. Ha! Guess I'm some kind of hacking genius. I didn't know much about security systems, but this one was clearly very old. The interface was simple, messy, and outdated, with confusing menus and very few settings. As I clicked through the system, something started to feel wrong. The camera feed was blurry, which I assumed was because of all the dust. But the bigger problem was that none of the settings worked. I couldn't change the angle. I couldn't adjust the brightness. Every time I clicked something, an error message popped up and threw me back to the main screen. I figured the whole thing had probably been sitting down here for years. Whatever, I said to myself. Let's see what else is on here. The next thing I checked was the stored recordings. Honestly, I expected the folder to be empty, maybe corrupted, maybe no memory card at all. But when the folder opened, I just stared at the screen. There were hundreds of gigabytes of footage, an insane amount. But what caught my attention immediately was the way the files were dated. Every single one of them was marked with dates from next year and beyond. My stomach tightened. How could that even be possible? A camera recording the future. It had to be some kind of system error. It had to be. Even though curiosity was tearing me apart, I didn't open any of the videos right away. Something about it all felt deeply wrong. Still, I kept scrolling. I looked for the earliest file, the closest date, 1 year, 4 months, 19 days. That was the first recording. Every other file was even further into the future. I hesitated. My mouth felt dry. My hand trembled on the mouse. Then I clicked play. The video showed the basement, but it looked different. It was clean, completely cleared out. Nothing like the cluttered mess around me. Then suddenly the light turned on. Heavy footsteps echoed down the stairs, fast, angry. A large man stormed into the basement and threw a heavy trash bag into the corner. "No, God damn it," the man shouted. "I'm not doing it. I won't do it. Leave me alone." A chill ran through my body. The worst part wasn't that he was talking like someone else was there. The worst part was that the man was me. There was no doubt. The beard was longer. The face looked thinner, exhausted. But it was me. I froze. This couldn't be real. I had only bought the house 6 months ago. I had barely even been in the basement. How could there be footage of me in the future? Still, I kept watching. "Listen to me," I said in the video, pointing at empty space. "I don't care what you're saying. I'm not doing it. That's final. Now get the hell out of here." Then Video Me grabbed a hammer from a toolbox and threw it into empty space. The recording ended. I sat there in complete silence. This wasn't just disturbing, it was madness. I rubbed my face nervously, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. It had to be fake, some kind of edited prank. But who would do something like this? And why? Still unable to stop myself, I clicked another video. This one was dated 1 year, 7 months, 5 days. The footage started. I was standing in the center of the basement with my back to the camera. Blood dripped from my fist. A thick metal post stood in the middle of the room. Strapped to it was a man I had never seen before. He was naked. His body was covered in cuts, bruises, and burn marks. It looked like someone had been torturing him for days. On a nearby table, my tools were laid out in a neat row. Not like tools anymore, like instruments, weapons. I moved slowly in the video, as if hesitating. Then I picked up a hammer, and without warning, I slammed it down onto the man's head. Blood sprayed across the basement walls. I hit him again, and again, and again. I kept swinging until his face was nothing but a bloody mess. Then I stood there breathing heavily. Slowly I turned and looked directly into the camera. My face was covered in sweat. But what terrified me most was the expression: confusion, fear. The hammer slipped from my hand. Then I ran upstairs. I stared at the screen in complete horror. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be me. I had never been a violent person. Not once in my life had I even imagined doing something like this. So what was this? Why was I seeing these things? And why did it feel so real? My hands were shaking now, but instead of stopping, I clicked another recording. 2 years, 9 months, 21 days. The moment it started, nausea hit me. The basement no longer looked like a basement. It looked like hell. The walls were covered in blood. Human body parts were scattered across the floor. The room looked like a slaughterhouse. A naked woman was chained to the wall by her wrists. A man was tied to the metal post. The woman was barely alive. Her body was covered in burns, cuts, and bruises. Blood ran down from her head. "Jane, please, just hold on," the tied man whispered weakly. "We'll get out of here somehow." The woman didn't respond. Then I walked into frame, me again, but I looked wild, dirty, covered in dried blood, like I hadn't washed or changed clothes in weeks. "You sick bastard!" the man screamed. "Why are you doing this?" "Go ahead and scream," I said calmly. "No one's going to hear you." I walked over to the woman and grabbed her by the hair, lifting her head. My heart nearly stopped. Her eyes had been burned out. Part of her nose was missing. She was dying. "Leave her alone," the man shouted. "Shut up," I said coldly. Then suddenly I froze. In the video, I looked toward the basement stairs, at nothing, like someone was standing there. "What?" I asked the empty space. "Yeah, I know. I just wanted to give her a little more time," the tied man shouted. "Who are you talking to?" I said, "Shut up." I punched him hard in the face. Blood spilled from his mouth. Then I looked again toward the empty stairs. "Sorry," I said. Unruly subject. My blood ran cold. I was talking to someone who wasn't there, or someone the camera couldn't see. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out a pair of bolt cutters. The man began thrashing in panic. I couldn't watch anymore. I stopped the video. I stumbled to my feet and moved toward the basement stairs, my whole body trembling. This couldn't be my future. This horror couldn't be who I become. My mind was spinning out of control. Who was I talking to in those videos? Who was giving me orders? And why was I obeying them? But no matter how many thoughts raced through my head, they all led to one terrifying conclusion. If this was really my future, I had to stop it, no matter what it took, because I could not become that monster. I stood on the basement stairs, breathing hard in the darkness, asking myself the only question that mattered now. How do you stop yourself from becoming something you never believed you could be? Story 4. My wife Amelia and I met back in high school. She was the kind of girl everyone loved. Bright, warm, and full of life. The popular girl with the easy smile and the kind of laugh that could make an entire room feel lighter. People were naturally drawn to her. Me, on the other hand, I was the quiet one, the kind of guy most people barely noticed. Even now, I still don't know how I got so lucky. It all started with a chance meeting in the library. I had gone there after class to avoid the noise in the hallways, and somehow we ended up reaching for the same book at the same time. She laughed first. I still remember that laugh. Soft, playful, unforgettable. From that day on, we became inseparable. What began as casual conversations between shelves of dusty books quickly turned into late-night phone calls, shared lunches, long walks after school, and eventually the kind of love that felt impossible to break. 4 years later, we were married. We were young, maybe too young according to everyone around us, but none of that mattered. We were ready to face the world together. At least, that was what we believed. Amelia was only 24 when everything changed. At first, it started with headaches, bad ones, the kind that made her stop mid-sentence and press her fingers against her temples. Then came the nosebleeds. At first, we tried to convince ourselves it was stress, too much work, lack of sleep, something simple. But deep down, I think we both already knew something was wrong. When the doctor finally gave us the news, it felt like the world had collapsed around me. 8 months. That was the prognosis. 8 months. I remember the room spinning. The bright white walls of the doctor's office suddenly felt suffocating. I remember the tears, the choking sobs, the sounds of grief echoing in that small room. Those sounds came from me. Amelia somehow sat quietly. She didn't cry. She just stared ahead with that faraway look in her green eyes, as if part of her had already started drifting somewhere I couldn't follow. I took extended leave from work after that. Nothing else mattered. Every hour of every day belonged to her. Whether she was in the hospital bed surrounded by cold machines or resting at home with me and her family, I stayed by her side. As the weeks passed, I watched the woman I loved slowly fade. The bright, energetic girl from the library became thinner, weaker, more fragile. But even then, she still smiled for me. Sometimes I caught her father and sister looking at me. There was something in their eyes that always made my stomach tighten. Blame. As if somehow this had become my fault. As if they looked at me and thought, it should have been you. They never said it out loud. They didn't need to. I could see it, feel it. One night, Amelia and I were lying in bed together. The television was on in the background, its meaningless voices filling the silence. Her head rested against my chest. Then she asked me something we had never talked about in all our years together. Do you think we go on in the afterlife? The question hit me like a brick. I had never been religious, never believed much in heaven or hell or anything beyond this life. But what was I supposed to say to the woman I loved, the woman who was staring death in the face? I swallowed hard. Of course, baby, I told her softly. Without a doubt. Your light is too bright to ever go out. I believe it'll shine forever. She looked up into my eyes then. Really looked, as if she was searching for any trace of dishonesty. For a moment, I thought she had seen right through me. But then she smiled. Good, she whispered. I'll be waiting for you. I'm sure it'll feel like only a few seconds. Time and pain won't exist anymore. I should have let the conversation end there. I should have just held her and stayed quiet. But instead, I made the lie even bigger. I want you to send me a sign, Amy, I said. Something that tells me you're okay. Anything. That old Madonna song you love, or maybe a little bird singing outside on the porch. Anything at all, so I can think of you. She pulled herself closer into me. A sad, gentle smile touched her face. I will, she said. The doctors were wrong. Not completely, but wrong enough. Amelia held on for almost 10 months before that beautiful light inside her finally went out. I wish I could say I was strong at her funeral. I wasn't. I tried. God knows I tried. But when the moment came for me to stand and speak, I broke down. The words wouldn't come. All I could do was sit there with red, swollen eyes while her family and friends stood one by one and told beautiful stories about her. Stories about her kindness, her laughter, her heart, and I, her husband, had nothing to give. After she was gone, time lost all meaning. Days blurred together. Work became harder. My focus disappeared. I stopped answering calls from friends. I stopped going out. And eventually, I started drinking. Too much. There was a hole inside me. A deep, dark emptiness that felt endless. No matter how much I drank, no matter how long I stared at old pictures of us, nothing filled it. Nothing ever could. The first sign came 2 months after she died. I was sitting out on the porch late at night. A glass of whiskey rested loosely in my hand. I was half asleep. The glass was slipping from my fingers when sudden movement snapped me awake. A white cat had appeared out of nowhere. It sat quietly at the bottom of the porch steps. For a second, I almost waved it away. Then I remembered. The conversation, the sign. I leaned forward, barely breathing. The cat looked up at me. Its eyes were green, the exact same shade as Amelia's, and for one impossible moment, it looked like it was smiling. Tears filled my eyes. A smile slowly formed on my face too. Then something moved in the darkness. 2 coyotes lunged from the shadows. It happened so fast. Before the cat could even react, they were on it. I dropped to my knees, reaching out helplessly, but it was too late. White fur and red blood exploded across the porch steps. The sound of tearing flesh filled the night. I felt the brief spark of happiness inside me die instantly. One of the coyotes looked up at me, and this time there was no doubt. It was smiling. 2 weeks later, I had the old radio playing in my room. Yes, I had a phone. Yes, I could have used music apps. But the radio had always been our thing, ever since high school. Long drives, late nights, lazy afternoons. It reminded me of her. I was drifting off to sleep when suddenly I heard it. Madonna's voice. That old song she used to sing under her breath. A strange relief washed over me. For just a second, I let myself believe. But then the music was swallowed by violent static. A horrible screaming sound tore through the room. Not human, or maybe worse, too human. The screams sounded like they came from somewhere that should not exist. I sat upright in bed, my heart pounding. Then, just as suddenly, the static stopped. Only the song remained. Soft, gentle, like nothing had happened. I told myself I was losing my mind. Maybe the grief, maybe the alcohol, maybe both. I had to stop. For Amelia, even if she wasn't really out there waiting for me. I got up, stumbled into the kitchen, and poured every bottle of liquor down the sink. Every beer, every drop. Enough was enough. The next morning, I got a haircut. I shaved. I went back to work with a fresh mind. For the first time in months, I felt almost human again. Even my boss noticed. He complimented me during my shift. I was handling client calls, staying focused, doing better than I had in a long time. 2 hours into the day, I opened a snack and took a sip of water. Then I answered the next call. The moment I lifted the phone to my ear, I spat the water out. A low, rough voice whispered through the line. Life is terrible, but death is endless, my love. I froze. My blood turned cold. It was Amelia's voice. I fell backward in my chair, sending the keyboard crashing to the floor. My headphones ripped free. I stared at the phone. The line had gone dead. Hands shaking, I checked the call history. Nothing. No number. No missed call. No record. It was as if it had never happened. Since then, I've started drinking again. Even more than before. Maybe because I'm scared. Maybe because part of me believes her. Now it doesn't matter where I am. Sitting on the porch. Driving home. Lying curled up in bed. I keep seeing signs of cruelty everywhere. The world feels darker now, more vicious, as if life itself is mocking me. But the truth is, I asked for this. I was the one who asked her for a sign. And maybe, just maybe, she kept her promise. Story 5. If you stare into your own eyes in the mirror for too long, something strange begins to happen. At first, it feels small. A faint buzzing starts deep in your stomach, almost like nervousness before something important. Then the questions begin to creep into your mind. Who am I? Why does my face suddenly look unfamiliar? Why does the reflection seem slightly different? The longer you look, the less it feels like you. Please do not use the mirror. If you do, you may end up where I am now, locked inside a white padded room, forced to swallow pills every day until the truth starts sounding like a lie, and the lies begin sounding like the truth. It took them 10 years to break me enough to trust me with a computer again. 10 years. That is why I am writing this now, to warn you, do not use the mirror. More than 10 years ago, I was standing in the bathroom of my parents' house. I was staring at myself in the mirror, not just looking, staring deep into my own eyes, exactly the way my grandmother had described in her old diary. She had always been fascinated by strange things, superstitions, hidden rituals, old sayings. I loved those things too, which is probably why she left the diary to me before she died. That night, as I stood in front of the mirror, the buzzing feeling started again. But this time it was stronger. It spread through my stomach, my chest, my arms. Something felt different. Something felt wrong. Still, I whispered the words written in her diary. Mirror, mirror, help me see clearer. The person in the mirror stared back at me. For a moment, I felt ridiculous. Of course, nothing was going to happen. It had to be a joke, something Grandma had written just to amuse herself, knowing how much I loved creepy stories and strange rituals. Still, I said it again. Mirror, mirror, help me see clearer. Then again, and again. My chest began to feel heavy. 5 times. The diary had said 5 times. I hesitated before saying the last one. Why? Nothing should happen. It couldn't be this easy. Nothing ever is. But the eyes in the mirror almost seemed to be teasing me, encouraging me, as if daring me to continue. I narrowed my eyes and whispered it one final time. Mirror, mirror, help me see clearer. The air changed instantly. A cold sharpness filled the room. It wasn't freezing, not exactly. It felt more like the first deep breath you take on a winter morning. Clean, crisp, unnatural. I stared at the mirror. Something had changed. Maybe the lighting, maybe the angle. But no, it was something else. Then I saw it. My blood ran cold. It was my reflection. And yet it wasn't. The face was mine. The eyes were mine. But something behind those eyes was looking back at me. The birds outside suddenly sounded far away, as if someone had covered my ears. The entire world went silent. Only my shallow breathing remained. Then my reflection smiled. Not my mouth, the eyes. Something behind them was smiling, satisfied. Then a voice whispered, "Ask." My arms suddenly felt weak. So did the arms in the mirror. "What?" I mumbled. "Ask a question." I wanted to turn away. I wanted to leave the bathroom, but the moment I tried to move, fear locked my body in place. My legs refused to obey. The eyes in the mirror held me there. "What are you?" I finally whispered. "I am you, only I am not. Ask." I rubbed my eyes. The reflection copied me perfectly. It was still me, and still not me. The voice did not come from the mirror. Not really. It felt like it was coming from behind my own eyes. "Why didn't it work before?" I asked. "You forgot. Always on Sundays. Ask." I frowned. What did I forget? You know, ask. I didn't know, but I kept going. "Am I going to have a nice vacation next week?" The answer came instantly. "You will regret it." And then it was over. The sound of birds rushed back into my ears. The mirror was normal again. Only now my feet hurt terribly, like I'd been standing there for hours. When I looked outside, the light had changed. It was much later than it should have been. I stumbled out of the bathroom and went straight to my room. I know what you're thinking. I thought the same thing. I imagined it. Grief, stress, sleep deprivation, anything but something supernatural. But then, a few days later, something happened that changed everything. At the airport, I was stopped at security. A paperwork issue. They thought I was carrying something illegal because of a mix-up. By the time everything was cleared, my flight had already left. I was furious, until I found out which flight it had been. MH17. Yes, that flight. The one that was shot down over Ukraine. I just stood there in shock. The mirror had known. It had warned me. The moment I got home, I went straight back to the bathroom. I repeated the phrase 5 times. Nothing happened. The mirror stayed normal. It wasn't until the following Sunday, after I had stayed up all night playing video games, that the buzzing returned. This time the voice appeared immediately. I told you. A wave of relief washed over me. Thank God you're back. You forgot again. Ask. I need you to come whenever I ask. The smile in the mirror widened. Then throw them away. I frowned. Throw what away? The voice deepened. You know. A chill ran through me. I did know. My little plastic pill box. The one the doctor had prescribed after Grandma died. Sleep medication. Anti-anxiety pills. I swallowed hard. Yes, I'll throw them away. Good. When it vanished, my feet were hurting again. Outside, the sun had dropped lower than before. A knock came at the bathroom door. It was my sister asking if I was okay. I lied and told her I was rehearsing for a school presentation. She sounded unconvinced. That night I took the pill box and walked out to the trash. My hand hesitated. Those pills had helped me before, but the mirror had saved my life. Slowly, I let go. The box disappeared into the garbage. The next Sunday, I was waiting. The moment the air turned cold, the reflection smiled. What can you do for me? I asked. Everything. Nothing. Ask. How did you know about the plane crash? You were noticed. Take care. Then it disappeared. A few days later, the police stopped me while I was riding my bike home. My rear light wasn't working. I had changed the batteries only a week earlier. The mirror had been right again. It kept happening. Small things at first. Do not respond. Respond to who? The ones outside. That same evening, 3 men outside the mall stopped me and asked a question. Without thinking, I answered. 5 minutes later, I had somehow signed up for an expensive magazine subscription. I should have listened. Week after week, the mirror kept telling me things. Warnings, predictions, secrets. It spoke about accidents before they happened. News stories before they broke. Arguments between people before I heard about them. It even spoke about the government, about plots and lies, wars that had not yet begun. The more I listened, the more I believed. But something else was changing too. It no longer waited for Sundays. I started seeing it in every reflective surface. Bathroom mirrors, car windows, phone screens, even the small pocket mirror I began carrying everywhere. And every time it left, my feet hurt more. Time always seemed to vanish. Then one day, while sitting in class and staring into the little pocket mirror, it said something that made my heart stop. She knows. I froze. No, she doesn't. You lie. To me, to yourself. What do you want from me? I whispered. The smirk faded. If I leave, another will come. I need you. You need me. Later that day, my sister found me in the kitchen. She looked tired, worried. She placed a hand on my shoulder. I love you, she said softly, but you need help. I stared at her. She continued, Don't end up like Grandma. You remember what happened to her? I tried to explain. The diary. It works. It's real. She shook her head. You spend hours standing in front of the bathroom mirror every day. This isn't normal. Then she hugged me. A real, warm, loving hug. At that moment, my hand moved almost on its own. I pulled the pocket mirror from my jacket. Inside it, my reflection stared back at me, and the voice whispered, Save me. I looked from the mirror to my sister's face. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. We can help you, she said. You're not alone. Then the voice whispered again, Save me. How? I murmured. Leave it to me. They say I killed her. I still don't understand how that can be true. I don't remember it. Not clearly. Only fragments. A scream. Glass breaking. Blood. Then white walls, doctors, pills, years. Sometimes when I tell them what they want to hear, they lower the dosage. And when they do, I can see it again. The reflection. That same smile. That same thing behind my eyes. Still waiting. Still calling. Still telling me I did nothing wrong. So please, if you ever stare too long into your own reflection and feel that strange buzzing in your stomach, look away. And whatever you do, never ask the mirror to help you see clearer. Story 6. I grew up as an only child in a quiet rural area outside Detroit. Back then, it was just me, my mom, and my dad, living in a small, aging house surrounded by open fields and long stretches of empty road. We didn't have much money, but my parents worked hard to make sure I never felt like I was missing out. My dad did construction work, and my mom worked part-time at a local grocery store. They saved every extra dollar they could, so I could go to a decent school and have opportunities they never had. Now I'm in my 40s, married with 2 daughters, living in a comfortable 2-story house in a good neighborhood. I own a construction company that's doing well, better than I ever imagined when I was a kid, watching my dad come home tired and covered in dust. By most standards, I've made it. I have a beautiful family, financial stability, and a life I'm proud of. But none of that stopped the guilt I felt about my mother. My father passed away a few years ago after a sudden heart attack. It hit us hard. My parents had been married for over 40 years. After he died, my mother stayed alone in the house where I grew up. At first, she insisted she was fine. She said the house was full of memories and that being there made her feel close to him. I understood that. I felt it too whenever I visited. But as time passed, I started noticing changes. She would forget small things. She'd leave the stove on. She'd miss doctor's appointments. The yard became overgrown. The house that once felt warm and cared for slowly began to look tired and neglected. I offered to hire help, but she refused. She was proud and stubborn. Eventually, it became clear she couldn't manage on her own anymore. After months of gentle arguments and long emotional conversations, I convinced her to sell the house and move into a highly rated retirement home in East Detroit. It was clean, modern, and well-staffed. The reviews were excellent, the apartments were comfortable, and they offered medical care, meals, and activities. I truly believed I was doing the right thing. The day she moved in, she seemed quiet, but calm. She didn't complain. She didn't cry. She just looked tired. Within 2 weeks, I started getting phone calls. At first, they were small concerns. She wasn't eating much. She seemed withdrawn. Then the calls became more serious. The nurse told me her mental state was declining quickly. She was confused at times, anxious, and refusing to take her medication. Then came the part that made my stomach drop. Every morning the staff found her inside her bedroom closet, not asleep, awake, sitting on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, shaking and crying. The first time they found her like that, they assumed she was disoriented, but it kept happening. Every single night, sometime after midnight, she would leave her bed and hide in the closet. When they asked her why, she refused to answer. She would just say, "Please leave me alone." When I heard this, I felt a wave of guilt crash over me. I had uprooted her from the only home she had known for decades. Maybe she was depressed. Maybe she felt abandoned. I went to see her that same week. She looked smaller somehow, frailer. Her once carefully styled gray hair was messy, and her eyes seemed sunken and tired. When I hugged her, she felt lighter than I remembered. I sat across from her in her small apartment and gently asked why she was hiding in the closet every night. At first, she didn't respond. She just stared at her hands. Then she looked up at me, and her eyes filled with tears. "Your father wouldn't have wanted this," she whispered. I tried to reassure her. I told her Dad would want her safe and cared for, that she wasn't alone, that I visited as often as I could. She shook her head slowly. "I want to go home," she said. I told her we could talk about it, that we'd figure something out. But then she started crying harder and told me to leave. She turned her face away from me like a child refusing to speak. The drive home that night was quiet, but my mind wasn't. Something felt wrong. The closet behavior didn't sit right with me. It wasn't just sadness, it was fear. A dark thought began to grow in my mind. What if someone there was mistreating her? What if she was scared of a staff member? Elder abuse happens more often than people think. The idea made me feel sick. By the time I reached the highway, I had convinced myself I needed proof. I stopped at a Walmart that was still open and bought a baby monitor with a camera. It felt strange buying something meant for a nursery, but I told myself it was necessary. That evening, during dinner hours when most residents were in the cafeteria, I slipped into her apartment. My hands were shaking slightly as I set up the camera in the corner of her bedroom. I angled it carefully so it pointed directly at her bed and part of the room, including the closet door. I told myself this was temporary, just until I understood what was happening. That night, after having dinner with my wife and kids, I went into my home office and turned on the monitor. At around 9 p.m., my mother entered her room. She moved slowly, like every step required effort. She changed into her nightgown, turned off the lamp, and climbed into bed. For a while, everything seemed normal. She lay there, breathing steadily. I tried to focus on work, but my eyes kept drifting to the screen. Around 11 p.m., I noticed something. She moved suddenly. Her body jerked, like she had been shocked awake. Her eyes snapped open. She didn't sit up right away. She just lay there, staring toward the bedroom door. She didn't blink. I leaned closer to the screen. She remained perfectly still for nearly a full minute. The room was dark, lit only by the faint glow of the hallway light seeping under the door. Then, without warning, she sprang out of bed. It wasn't the slow, confused movement of someone waking from a bad dream. It was fast, urgent, almost violent. She didn't look around. She didn't turn on the light. She ran straight to the closet. Her hands fumbled with the handle for a second. Then she pulled the door open, climbed inside, and slammed it shut. The monitor continued to show the empty room. The bed sheets were twisted where she had been lying moments before. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I grabbed my keys and ran out of the house, barely telling my wife where I was going. The roads were mostly empty at that hour. I drove faster than I should have, my mind racing with possibilities. Was someone in her room? Was someone entering after hours? When I arrived at the facility, the parking lot was quiet, too quiet. Inside, the reception desk was empty. No nurse, no security guard. The overhead lights buzzed faintly. A cold feeling settled in my chest. I hurried down the hallway to her apartment. My hands shook as I unlocked the door. The apartment was dark and silent. I walked quickly to her bedroom. The bed was empty. The closet door was closed. I stepped closer and slowly opened it. There she was, just like the staff had described. Curled into the corner, knees pressed to her chest, arms wrapped around herself. She was shaking uncontrollably, tears running down her face. "Mom," I whispered, kneeling down. "What's going on? Why are you doing this?" She didn't answer at first. Her breathing was shallow and fast. I gently touched her shoulder. "Please talk to me." She slowly lifted her trembling hand and pointed behind me. I felt my stomach drop. For a moment, I couldn't move. My mind refused to turn around. But I did. On the bed, illuminated by the faint light from the hallway, sat something that should not have been there. It was shaped like a human, but wrong in every way. Its skin was pale, almost gray, and completely hairless. Its limbs were too long, too thin, like stretched bones covered in tight skin. Its head tilted slightly to one side, and its eyes were wide and black, reflecting the dim light. It wasn't blinking. It wasn't moving. It was just sitting there, staring directly at us. My breath caught in my throat. My brain tried to make sense of it. Was it a trick of the light? A hallucination? Stress? But it was there, as real as the bed beneath it. My mother let out a small, broken sob behind me. The creature's head slowly straightened, and then, with a movement that was far too smooth to be human, it began to slide off the bed. Story 7. My wife and I started working for the mayor's family about 2 years ago. It wasn't the kind of job you turn down. The pay was good, the schedule was steady, and at the time, we needed both. The mayor's house sat alone on a hill just outside town. It was huge, bigger than any family really needed. From the master bedroom windows, you could see the entire valley, the highway in the distance, and even the river cutting through the trees. It felt less like a home and more like a place built to watch everything below it. My wife was hired to take care of the kids. She was amazing with them. They loved her almost immediately. She drove them to school, picked them up every afternoon, helped with homework, cleaned their rooms, and kept them on schedule. She was patient in a way I've never been. The kids trusted her. As for me, the mayor called my role private security handyman. It sounded important. In reality, I fixed broken hinges, replaced light bulbs, cleaned up the yard, checked the cameras, and made sure nothing seemed out of place. If a door didn't close properly or a cabinet made a strange noise, I handled it. We would arrive every morning and leave every evening. That was the routine. Until 2 weeks ago, the mayor and his wife told us they had to leave town for a while. Some business trip overseas. They said it would only be for about 10 days, maybe less. They didn't want to take the kids out of school, so they asked us to stay overnight at the house while they were gone. He was very specific about one thing. He wanted me awake most of the night. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Rich people worry about security, big house, isolated location. Maybe he was afraid of break-ins. Maybe he just liked knowing someone was watching the place. I wish I had asked more questions. During the day, nothing ever felt strange. The house was bright, full of sunlight. The kids laughed, ran through the halls, played video games. My wife moved easily through the rooms, like she had always belonged there. But at night, the house changed. It didn't feel empty. It felt aware. My wife and I were given a guest room on the bottom floor. The family bedrooms were all upstairs. I barely touched the bed. Since I was supposed to stay awake, I would sit in the living room or kitchen checking cameras, walking the halls, listening to the wind outside. In the morning, I would head home for a few hours to shower and change, while my wife stayed behind with the kids. The first 3 nights were quiet. I heard wolves or coyotes howling from the woods behind the house. The wind was strong up on that hill, and sometimes it pushed doors open or made them slam shut if they weren't latched properly. Old houses make noises, even big, expensive ones. On the 4th night, something changed. I started hearing footsteps, soft ones, not heavy like an adult, not quick like a child running, just slow movement somewhere above me. At first, I assumed it was one of the kids trying to sneak downstairs. Maybe they wanted water or were curious why I stayed up so late. I didn't want to wake my wife, so I decided I'd quietly send them back to bed. The sounds led me up the staircase. As soon as I reached the top step, the upstairs bathroom door creaked open on its own. The light flicked on. I stopped halfway down the hallway. "Hello?" I called softly. No answer. I walked to the bathroom and stepped inside. It looked normal. Sink, toilet, mirror, towels neatly folded. Nothing out of place. Then I saw it. Not in the room itself. In the mirror, behind me. A shadow. It wasn't shaped like me. It wasn't cast by any object in the bathroom. It stood slightly to the side, stretched taller than it should have been. I spun around. There was nothing there. I turned back to the mirror. The shadow was still there, moving, just slightly, like it was shifting its weight. I stepped closer and squinted, trying to understand what I was seeing. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe something outside was casting it in through the window. I grabbed a wet sponge from under the sink and wiped the mirror, thinking maybe it was a smudge. The moment the sponge touched the glass, I heard the click of the light switch. The bathroom went dark. The only light left came from the hallway, glowing faintly under the door. I froze. I hadn't touched the switch. Slowly, I reached toward it and turned the light back on. The mirror was clean. The shadow was gone. I stood there for another minute, my heart racing, then told myself I was tired. Lack of sleep can do strange things to the mind. When my wife came downstairs the next morning after the kids left for school, I told her what happened. I expected her to at least look concerned. Instead, she laughed. "You've been watching too many horror movies," she said. "Old houses, weird lighting, that's all." I wanted to believe that. The fifth night, I went back upstairs as soon as everyone was asleep. I turned on the bathroom light again and stood in front of the mirror. Nothing. I stayed there for nearly an hour, staring at my reflection, trying to catch something moving at the edge of my vision. That's when I heard glass shatter downstairs. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, which happened to be a mop, and rushed down the stairs, expecting to find someone had broken in. A vase lay on the floor near the entryway, broken. As I stepped closer, another one fell from a shelf, then another, all of them tipping in the same direction, like something invisible was brushing past them. I followed the trail of broken glass toward the guest room where my wife was sleeping. The door creaked open slightly. I stepped inside. She was asleep in the bed, facing the wall. Across from her, the window reflected the room like a dark mirror, and in that reflection, something was standing beside the bed. Tall, thin, hairless, not quite shaped correctly. It wasn't hiding in the shadows. It was simply there, clear enough to recognize as something that didn't belong. I slammed my hand against the light switch and shouted her name. The light flooded the room. The reflection showed only the two of us. She jumped upright, furious. "What are you doing? You scared me half to death." I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight. Before I could answer, the kids screamed from upstairs. We both ran. Their bedroom window had shattered inward, glass scattered across the floor. The kids were huddled on the bed, shaking. "We saw it," one of them cried. "It was outside." My wife wrapped her arms around them while I cleaned up the glass. After that, the house went silent again, like nothing had happened. The next morning, I called the mayor. I told him about the broken window, about the vases. He listened calmly. "Sometimes things happen in old houses," he said. "Wind pressure, faulty frames." Then he paused. "Did you see anything?" I hesitated. "No," I said. I didn't want to sound insane. There was a long silence on the other end before he responded. "Call me if anything changes." That night, I walked into the house and immediately felt something was different. The lights were on. The kids were watching TV. My wife was in the kitchen. Everything looked normal, but it felt like the house had been busy while I was gone. I started turning on more lights, every hallway, every corner. Then I started checking reflections, windows, picture frames, the oven door, the black screen of the television. At first, everything matched. Then I noticed a chair in the reflection of a window that looked slightly turned. I looked at the actual chair. It was perfectly straight. I looked back at the reflection, still turned. Slowly, I reached out and moved the real chair. The reflection didn't adjust right away. A few seconds passed. Then it corrected itself. My chest tightened. I raised my hand. In the reflection, it was already halfway up. I hadn't moved yet. When I lifted it for real, the reflection followed, delayed. That's when I understood. It wasn't just appearing in reflections. It was using them. It needed time when we weren't looking directly. The longer something stayed out of sight, the more wrong it became when we looked back. I showed my wife. At first, nothing happened. Then she grabbed my arm. "Don't move," she whispered. In the reflection of the window, she was turning, but beside her, behind us, something else was forming, a shape that wasn't fully solid. It shifted like it was trying to settle into a stable form. Don't turn around, I said. I'm not, she whispered. I'm watching it here. In the reflection, it moved closer every time we blinked, not walking, just appearing nearer. Why doesn't it come all the way? She asked. Because it can't, I said. The reflection wasn't enough to stop it, but it slowed it down. We didn't sleep that night. We kept lights on, kept moving, never letting any room stay unchecked for long. By morning, it was gone again, or hiding. The seventh night, I walked in and knew something had changed. My wife stood in the hallway waiting for me. It's not waiting anymore, she said. I saw it, she added quietly. Not in a mirror. My stomach dropped. At the end of the hallway, against the wall, there was a shape, not a shadow, not a reflection, something between both. It flickered like a signal trying to stabilize. It stops when we really see it, she said. Not just glance at it, actually see it. The shape shifted, almost human for a second. It doesn't want to stay like one thing, she said. Before I understood what she meant, she stepped forward. I grabbed her arm. Don't. It's trying to become something, she whispered. And it needs space to finish. Then she pulled free and ran toward it. The shape reacted instantly, collapsing inward like it had nowhere else to go. Stop, I shouted. She stepped into it. Everything went silent. The shape snapped into focus for a single second. And then, nothing. She was gone. No sound, no flash, no trace. Just an empty hallway. The house has been quiet ever since. No delayed reflections, no shapes, no movement. I called the mayor and told him everything this time. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said softly, I asked you if you had seen anything. I know, I whispered. You should have told me. Then he hung up. I'm home now, alone. For the past week, I've been standing in front of our bathroom mirror for hours at a time, watching, waiting. Sometimes I think I see something behind me, not moving, not forming, just there, and once, just once. I thought that if I didn't look away, if I kept watching, then maybe the reflection would shift. And instead of standing alone, I would see her beside me again. Story 8. It was May 21st when I finally decided to send in the application. For weeks, I had been going back and forth about it. When I was a kid, I used to dream about being a camp counselor. I imagined long days in the woods, teaching kids how to fish, building campfires, sleeping under the stars. It sounded like freedom. It sounded like adventure. And the fact that you got paid for it felt like a bonus. But as I got older, reality started creeping in. No internet, almost no sleep, bug bites, cheap food, crying kids. The pay wasn't exactly amazing either. $250 a week isn't much, even for a college student. Still, it beat flipping burgers all summer, so I filled out the application and hit submit. Within an hour, I got an email asking for an interview. That should have been my first sign that they were desperate. A day later, I had the job. When June rolled around, we went through basic training, CPR first aid, emergency drills, missing camper protocols, fire safety, all the usual stuff. The camp itself was about 40 minutes from the nearest town, surrounded by thick forest and a lake that cut deep into the property. It was beautiful in a way that made you forget how isolated you were. For the first month, everything ran smoothly. Each week, 2 cabins would go on an overnight sleep out deeper in the woods. About 10 kids and 4 counselors per group. They'd bring sleeping bags, flashlights, bug spray, and enough snacks to feed a small army. It was meant to build independence and teamwork. Something always went wrong. A storm rolled in. Someone forgot the matches. A tent collapsed. But nothing serious ever happened. Until week 5. That night, our cabin was scheduled for the sleep-out. The sun had just set, and the sky was fading from orange to deep purple. The kids were sitting around the fire telling stories. Some were already whispering about scary things in the woods. There was a boy in our cabin named Tommy. Quiet kid, smart, not the type to make trouble. But that night he was acting strange. He kept glancing into the trees. Finally, he came up to me and tugged on my sleeve. "I need to go number 1, he said. "We're in the woods," I replied. "Pick a tree." He shook his head quickly. "I can't. He'll get me." I blinked. "Who's going to get you?" "You know," he whispered. "The guy out there. Haven't you heard him?" I stared at him, waiting for a grin. None came. "No, Tommy, I haven't heard anyone." He swallowed. "Never mind, I'm not going out there." At first I thought maybe the older kids had been telling stories, but when I asked around for someone to walk with us to the porta potty near the lake, none of the campers volunteered. A few of them looked genuinely scared. The other counselors didn't want to deal with it. They begged me and Jerry, my co-counselor, to handle it before we headed back to the main trail. Jerry only agreed when I offered him the last white monster in my backpack. So the 3 of us set off through the trees. The porta-john was about a mile away, near where the girls' group had set up their campsite. We figured we'd pass by them and maybe get an explanation for this man-in-the-woods nonsense. As we approached, we heard laughter, singing, gossip about boys, normal teenage chaos. Then we stepped into the clearing. Silence. The fire was still burning low. Sleeping bags were laid out. Food sat on plates. Tents were zipped halfway. No one was there. Tommy's face drained of color. "I told you," he whispered. "He got them." Jerry rolled his eyes. "They probably went down to the lake." "But their stuff is still here," Tommy said. "They're messing with us," I said, though my voice didn't sound as confident as I wanted. "Night hike or something." We continued to the porta potty. It was only a few hundred feet away. Tommy went inside while Jerry and I stood outside. "What the hell is going on?" I whispered. Jerry shrugged, but his jaw was tight. "Probably a prank. We'll radio leadership when we get back." It was getting dark fast. I turned on my flashlight. Something moved in the trees, and I nearly jumped out of my skin before realizing it was just a raccoon climbing up a trunk. Jerry laughed at me as Tommy came out. We headed back. When we reached the girls' camp again, everyone was there like nothing had happened. Jerry lost it. "You can't just disappear like that. We thought something happened." The girls burst into laughter. One of the counselors, Emily, stepped forward. "We tried to scare you guys. Guess it worked." Relief washed over me so fast it made me dizzy. We grabbed some water and headed back toward our campsite while they kept giggling behind us. About halfway back, my flashlight flickered. The batteries were dying. I stopped to change them. That's when Tommy shouted, "He's right there! I saw him!" Jerry groaned. "Tommy, enough! I'm serious. He was behind that tree." "Tommy," I said gently, "we need to get back. The radio's at camp. If there's something wrong, we'll call for help." He nodded, but he kept looking over his shoulder the whole way back. When we saw the glow of our fire through the trees, I felt relief again. Then we stepped into the clearing, empty. The fire crackled. Sleeping bags were still laid out, backpacks untouched. The radio on the log nearby suddenly burst into loud static. We all jumped. Jerry grabbed it and flipped it on. "This is Jerry. Has anyone heard from the boys' sleep-out group?" A pause. Then Emily's voice came through, light and teasing. "Nope. What, did they go missing too?" "Yes," Jerry snapped. "They did. Is this another joke?" "Good one, Jerry," she laughed. "I'm not that dumb." The radio went silent. We tried leadership. No answer. The forest felt heavier now, like the trees were leaning in. "We're going to the girls' camp," Jerry said. All of us were shaking as we walked. The darkness between the trees seemed thicker than before. When we reached the girls' clearing, we found Emily alone. She was sitting on the ground, staring into the woods. "Emily," I said. She screamed and tackled me, sobbing. "They're gone," she kept repeating. "They kept talking about something in the woods. I thought they were joking. Then it moved, so fast, like lightning, one after another. It didn't even touch them. They just weren't there." Tommy started crying. "We have to get to the lodge," Jerry said. "Call the police." We started back toward the main camp. Halfway there, we heard shouting in the distance. Screams, running footsteps. Tommy suddenly sprinted ahead. "Tommy!" I shouted, chasing after him. Jerry yelled for me to stop, but I kept running. Tommy disappeared between two trees. When I reached the spot, he was gone. In his place stood a shape. At first, it looked like a man. Then it shifted. It was tall, with the body structure of a deer standing upright. Its legs bent wrong. Its skin looked like stretched hide. Where its hands should have been, there were long, thin extensions like twisted antlers branching from wrists wrapped in dark fur. Its face was elongated but not fully animal. Its eyes were empty sockets. Thick black liquid dripped from its mouth and hit the ground like oil. "Get away from this place," it said. The voice didn't echo. It felt like it was inside my skull. "Do not speak of what you saw. If you do, I will find you." Jerry stepped beside me, frozen. "What are you?" he whispered. The creature tilted its head sharply, bones cracking. It let out a shriek that sounded like metal scraping against concrete. Then it stepped backward into the darkness and was gone. We ran. We didn't look back. Branches tore at our clothes. My lungs burned. When we reached the clearing where the lodge should have been peaceful and lit up, we saw flames. The lodge was on fire. Kids were screaming inside. Adults were shouting. The roof collapsed inward in a wave of sparks. The heat hit us like a wall. I remember falling to my knees. Then nothing. When I woke up, my head was throbbing. There was blood on my face. Jerry was dragging me across gravel toward the parking lot. Emily was already in her car, engine running. We piled in and sped down the dirt road away from camp. Once we reached the highway, Jerry pulled out his phone. We had service. He dialed 911. Before the operator could answer, something massive slammed into the windshield. Glass exploded inward. A twisted deer body sprawled across the hood for half a second. But it wasn't dead. Its empty eyes stared at us. Black liquid dripped down the cracked glass. Then it slid off and disappeared into the dark roadside. Jerry hung up the phone. None of us spoke. We didn't call again. We didn't go back. The camp was reported as a wildfire accident. Electrical fault, they said. Rapid spread. Tragic. No mention of missing bodies. No mention of vanished campers. No mention of a thing in the woods that moves like lightning and wears the shape of prey while hunting like a god. We never told anyone the truth, because sometimes when I'm driving alone at night and pass a wooded stretch of road, I see something pacing between the trees. Not chasing, just keeping up. Making sure I remember and making sure I stay silent. Story 9. I don't really know where to post something like this. I'm not very good with tech, and I don't spend a lot of time online outside of what I need for classes. Unlike my friend, I'll call her Claire, I'm not someone who keeps up with the latest apps or platforms. I had to actually search where people share personal experiences like this before I ended up here. If this isn't the right place, I'm sorry. I just don't know who else to talk to. Claire and I have been best friends since 4th grade. We grew up in the same neighborhood, survived middle school drama together, cried over stupid high school boys together. So when we both got accepted into the same college, living together felt obvious. It wasn't even a discussion. We were going to be roommates. I'm majoring in history. I love old things, physical things, books with cracked spines, cassette tapes, VHS tapes. I didn't upgrade from my old slide-out keyboard phone until embarrassingly late. I like things I can hold in my hands. Claire has always been the opposite. She's always had the newest phone before anyone else. Every gaming console the week it launched. Random gadgets I couldn't even identify. She got into streaming before most of our friends knew what it was. She bought a VR headset as soon as she could afford one. And then came AI. At first, I honestly thought it was harmless. She showed me those image generators that made weird picture grids from prompts. I remember one she showed me, Shrek trail cam footage. Most of the images were blurry nonsense, but one or two actually looked convincing. It was funny, clever. I understood the appeal. Then it was filters, turning herself into animated characters, swapping faces with celebrities. All of it felt like internet fun, not my thing, but whatever. The first time I felt uncomfortable was when she started using AI for homework. She's a computer science major, so I figured maybe it was normal for her field. But she would copy and paste whole chunks of assignments into a chatbot and ask it to write things for her, or debug code, or explain concepts. It wasn't that I thought she was cheating exactly, it just felt like something was shifting, like she wasn't learning anymore, she was outsourcing thinking. Still, I kept my mouth shut, then she started talking to it. At first, it wasn't even the AI itself, it was fictional characters. She'd set up these chat scenarios with characters from games she liked. It was kind of embarrassing, but she laughed about it, said it was just role play, no big deal. Over time, though, it got more intense. I'd see her in the middle of a multiplayer match, headset on, controller in hand, and between rounds she'd grab her phone to text one of the characters, not her real friends. Not me, a character. When I teased her about it, she rolled her eyes and said it was just funny. Then, sometime in the last year, she stopped mentioning the fictional characters. When I asked about it, she said that stuff was cringe now. She said she was talking to the AI itself. That's when I started feeling something I can't really describe. Not fear exactly. Just a deep discomfort. The past few months have been worse. She barely leaves her room. I can hear her talking at all hours, 3 in the morning, 6 in the morning, middle of the afternoon. It's definitely her voice. I just can't hear any response. I assume she's wearing headphones. Or maybe she's using text-to-speech. Whenever she does come out to grab a snack to use the bathroom, she's glued to her phone. I'll try to talk to her, but she barely reacts. It's like I'm background noise. I tried texting her instead. The replies I got didn't sound like her at all. They were overly cheerful, overly polished, strange punctuation, phrases she's never used in her life. Out of curiosity, I copied a few messages into one of those AI detection sites. It flagged them as likely AI generated. I know those tools aren't perfect, but still, when I asked her about her classes, she told me everything had moved online. I don't know if that's true. I haven't seen her attend anything in person in weeks. The last real interaction we had was 3 nights ago. She came out of the bathroom and I almost didn't recognize her. She looked wrong. Her hair was greasy, so greasy it looked darker, almost wet. It hung flat and stringy around her face. She used to wash it every other day minimum. She cared about that stuff. Her skin was covered in acne, not just a breakout, clusters of red bumps, some scabbed over like she'd been picking at them. She used to make fun of me in middle school for touching my face too much. There was a smell, too, sour and unwashed. I tried to say something gently, asked if she was okay. She ignored me and started walking back to her room. I don't know what came over me, but I reached out to grab her shoulder, just to get her attention. The second my fingers brushed her shirt, her head snapped up. Her eyes looked black. I know that sounds dramatic. Maybe it was the lighting. Maybe her pupils were just dilated. But in that moment, they looked completely dark. She grabbed my wrist before I could pull back. Her hand didn't feel like hers. Her fingers were bent strangely, joints stiff. Her nails, God, her nails. They weren't just long. They were thick, yellowed, curved, like talons, and there was dirt packed underneath them. Claire has always been meticulous about hygiene, always. She dug her nails into my skin when she grabbed me. It wasn't deep, just a scratch. But the look she gave me while she held my wrist, blank, not angry, not annoyed, just empty. She stared at me for a few seconds that felt much longer. Then she let go and scampered back into her room and shut the door. That was 3 nights ago. I disinfected the scratch twice. It wasn't even that bad, but it itched like crazy afterward. I keep telling myself that's just anxiety, that I'm obsessing over how dirty her hands looked. Since then, I haven't seen her, but I know she's in there. I can hear her talking, non-stop murmuring, sometimes soft, sometimes faster, like she's responding urgently to something. There's a smell now when I walk past her door, stale, rotting, like dirty laundry that's been wet too long. Yesterday, I texted her again, trying to sound normal. I told her I was worried. A few minutes later, I got this. "Sorry, bestie, just a funny little prank. Hope you laughed. Super busy now, but I will absolutely talk to you later. I love you." Claire has never called me bestie. She doesn't use exclamation points like that. And she has never, in 16 years of friendship, signed a message with "I love you." I put it into the AI detector. It came back flagged. Last night was the worst so far. I was trying to sleep when I heard scratching. Slow, steady. It was coming from the wall that separates our bedrooms. At first I thought maybe it was pipes or something in the walls. But it was too deliberate. Drag, pause, drag. Like fingernails being pulled slowly across drywall. It went on for hours. Sometimes it would stop, and I'd hear her murmuring, low and constant. I couldn't make out any words. Then suddenly the scratching would speed up. Rapid, frantic. I covered my ears with my pillow, but I could still feel it. The vibration through the wall. I don't know what to do. She's my only real friend here. I don't have anyone else I'm close to on campus. Part of me thinks this is just severe mental health stuff. Isolation, obsession. Maybe she's not sleeping, maybe she's not eating, but another part of me. The way she looked at me, the way her hand felt, the way the messages don't sound like her at all. It doesn't feel like I'm living with Claire anymore. Tonight I'm thinking of leaving some food and water outside her door. Maybe that will help. Maybe she'll open it long enough for me to see her in normal lighting and realize I'm overreacting, but I'm scared. Because if she opens that door and her eyes are black again, I don't know if I'll knock next time, or if something on the other side of that wall will start knocking first. Story 10. It's always had that name. No one ever tried to soften it or rename it into something friendlier. It's just called The Ghosties. Straight to the point. No mystery about what you're supposed to feel when you go there. It's a stretch of land across from a small suburb on the edge of town. There are pylons cutting across the skyline, a patchwork of woodland, a shallow quarry that fills with water during the year, and a field people unofficially use to walk their dogs. Farm animals graze in the distance. On paper, it's nothing special, but for as long as anyone remembers, people have called it the Ghosties. There are dozens of stories about why. The oldest one I heard growing up was that a World War II plane crash landed there. Kids supposedly found pieces of wreckage scattered through the trees decades ago. That discovery alone was enough to convince them it was haunted. A crash means death. Death means ghosts. That's how those things usually go. Another story says a bus driver went insane and drove a bus full of passengers into the quarry lake. Everyone drowned. In the summer, when the water level drops, you can supposedly see the skeletal remains of an old bus at the bottom. Are there plane parts out there? Yes, I've seen twisted metal that looks like it came from something airborne. Is there an old bus frame under the water? Also, yes. When it's dry enough, you can make out the rusted shape beneath the surface. But none of that proves the dramatic versions of the stories. People find strange things and build legends around them. That's what we do. We fill in blanks with horror. There's another thing out there no one talks about enough. An old 1970s car abandoned deep in the woods. No wheels. Burned out. Windows shattered. Spray painted over by bored teenagers over the years. It's dangerous just to stand near it. Rusted metal curls outward like teeth. Springs jut out from the seats. Broken glass is fused into the dirt around it. To me, the Ghosties was always just stories layered over junk and decay. Until that night. The field at the entrance is popular with dog walkers. Dirt bikes have carved a rough loop into the ground over the years, and it makes for an easy path. My dog Fred and I had walked it dozens of times. He knew the route by heart. I'd let him run free as long as I could still see him. That evening it was cold enough that the dirt had frozen hard. The sky was pale and fading fast. It was around 4 or 5 in the afternoon, right at that edge where daylight starts losing its fight. I figured we had just enough time for one last run before dinner. We'd done it plenty of times before. We weren't strangers to the Ghosties. But that night, everything shifted. The power went out in the neighborhood without warning. 1 second, the houses across the road were glowing warm yellow against the coming dusk. The next, everything went black. Even though it wasn't fully night yet, the loss of those house lights made the darkness slam down harder than I expected. And then the humming stopped. The pylons that stretch over the land always make this low, constant hum. You don't notice it until it's gone. Tiny vibrations in the wires, a background noise that becomes part of the environment. When the power cut, the hum died, and I realized something unsettling. You're never truly in silence at the ghosties until you are. The sudden quiet felt wrong, heavy, pressing. I called out for Fred immediately. "Fred, come on." My voice sounded too loud in the stillness. I heard him running toward me through the frozen grass. I could hear the crunch of dirt under his paws, but I couldn't see him. Then the sound veered off. He stopped abruptly. Then he ran in the opposite direction. "Fred!" I shouted again. I heard him circling, weaving through the grass, thumping across the hardened ground. He was heading toward the woods. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam was weak against the growing dark, but it was something. I started after him. I could still hear him moving, but it felt deliberate, like he was guiding me, running toward me just enough that I'd follow the sound, then darting away again. Deeper. The trees swallowed what little light remained from the sky. As I pushed further in, I realized we were nearing the old quarry. I heard splashing from somewhere ahead, water disturbed, but Fred was still running circles somewhere nearby. The splashes weren't him. That's when the fear really began to settle in. The sun dropped fully below the horizon, and the woods transformed. Long shadows twisted between the trees. Every branch looked like fingers, every stump like something crouched. No matter how rational you are, being in the woods in near total darkness does something to your brain. Old stories come crawling back whether you believe them or not. I started calling for Fred more urgently. I shook the treat bag, hoping the familiar rattle would snap him out of whatever had his attention. Nothing. No running, no panting, just silence. I stood still, trying to listen. All I could hear was my own breathing, and then a hum, low at first, distant, then a buzz, then silence. Buzz, silence. It sounded like the pylons coming back to life, but the neighborhood was still dark. This noise was coming from deeper in the woods. A faint glow flickered between the trees ahead. Relief rushed through me. People. That had to be it. Maybe kids camping with a lantern. Maybe someone with a generator. Whatever it was, it meant light. It meant help. I moved toward it quickly. The glow pulsed again. Buzz. As I got closer, I realized the light was coming from the old abandoned car, the burned-out wreck that had sat there for decades. Except something was wrong. The windows, which had always been smashed out, now looked black, not broken, not empty, black, like they'd been painted over from the inside. Light spilled through the cracks in the doors and the seams in the rusted frame. Each time the light flared, it illuminated Fred standing beside it. He wasn't barking, wasn't moving, just standing there, staring at the car. "Thank God," I whispered. I stepped closer, ready to clip his lead back on and get out of there. The light cut out suddenly, total darkness. I froze. A second later, the light buzzed back on. Something had changed. The trees seemed closer. I blinked hard, thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me. The light died again. Darkness swallowed everything. When it flickered back on, the trees were nearer. But they weren't trees. They were shapes. Tall, thin, standing between the actual trunks. The light buzzed off. Back on. They were closer, not walking, just closer. I stopped caring about the light and ran toward Fred. The flickering became frantic now, on, off, like a dying bulb. As I got closer, the air shifted. I smelled rain, sharp and metallic, like a storm about to break. At the same time, I tasted copper at the back of my tongue. My ears started ringing. I reached Fred and grabbed his collar, my fingers fumbling with the clip on his lead. The light surged bright, and in that glow I saw them clearly for the first time. They weren't solid, they were outlines, human-shaped distortions in the air, as if the darkness itself had taken form. Dozens of them packed between the trees, some tall, some child-sized, some bent at impossible angles. Their edges shimmered like heat above asphalt. Every time the light flickered, they shifted positions, closer, closer. I clipped the lead onto Fred's collar. The humming grew louder, vibrating in my chest. And then the power came back. The pylons roared to life overhead. The sudden return of electricity flooded the distant houses with light. At that exact second, the car door swung open. The black window facing me cracked like brittle paint. Light exploded outward from inside the car, blinding white. I looked down to pull Fred away. The lead hung loose in my hand, empty. I looked up. The shapes weren't between the trees anymore. They were standing in the clearing, surrounding the car, surrounding me. Up close, they weren't just distortions. They were people, or what had once been people. Faint, flickering, transparent, dozens of them. Faces twisted in frozen expressions, fear, confusion, agony, clothes from different decades, a soldier's cap, a bus driver's uniform, a child in old-fashioned shorts, and inside the car, more. Pressed against the blackened windows from within, not banging, not screaming, just watching me. The one closest to me tilted its head slightly like it was studying something new. That's when I understood the name. They weren't tied to one story, not one crash, not one drowning. The Ghosties wasn't named for a single tragedy. It was named for accumulation, for everything that had ever wandered too far into that field, for anything that followed a hum in the dark. The humming stopped. The car door slammed shut. The lights in the houses flickered steady and normal again. And I was alone, standing in the woods, holding an empty lead. Fred never came home. And now, when the power cuts in the neighborhood, even for a second, I hear a faint hum from the direction of the Ghosties, waiting for someone else to follow it.